In case you aren't aware, Nintendo has been trying to sue Pocket Pair, the makers of Palworld, into the dirt ever since their Mega Million-Dollar franchise launched last year. Palworld, as you know, took the world by storm. It evolved many concepts that Nintendo frankly was just uninterested in doing themselves, because Pokemon was making them boatloads of money either way. But once Palworld released officially, and it broke over 1 million players on Steam concurrently alone, Nintendo stepped in and angrily claimed that Palworld was infringing on their copyright patents. Since then, Palworld has had to remove many elements of their games due to the lawsuit. For an example, Pals are no longer able to come out of balls because Nintendo says it's too similar to their Pokeball mechanic. You also can't fly on your pals anymore because according to Nintendo, it's too similar to how you can ride on Pokemon's backs. That one is kind of egregious, especially because I have no idea how you can claim that you own the right to mount traversal in a video game. But anyways, there's been developments, and it looks like if these are to be believed, that in terms of who's winning this lawsuit, it looks actually to favor Palworld and not Nintendo. After this, I'll get into some general Nintendo news I want to talk about as well, and if you can like the video and leave a comment, it would help the channel out immensely. Thank you, but now let's get into it. Firstly, this is from Dexerto.com. Nintendo makes bizarre change to Palworld lawsuit. So like I said, this is all about patents and what can and cannot be used based on what Nintendo feels is right. But now, they're apparently going behind the backs of everyone, Pocket Pair included, to change their patent's terminology amidst this ongoing lawsuit. The specific patent changed was the one in regards to switching between ground to flying mounts by riding your pals. Nintendo has updated their terminology on this patent, which reads as follows, and it's a word salad, but it reads, and even when emphasis added any boarding character other than the aerial boarding character capable of moving in the air is the currently selected boarding character, and a first operation input is given when the player character is in the air, the computer causes the aerial boarding character to appear in the virtual space, and causes the player character to board the aerial boarding character instead of the currently selected boarding character from among the boarding characters. Yeah, like I said, a word salad. Basically, Nintendo is adding words like even when to their patent's terminology, which is only being done to muddy up and confuse exactly what is allowed according to their patents based on what YouTubers like Legal Mindset has said in the past. Which is this man on screen here in case you don't know, who is, yes, also an actual lawyer. So this patent change in Legal Mindset's opinion is only being done by a rival company during a lawsuit for a single reason, which is because they are losing and are not getting the intended outcome they thought was going to happen when it comes to them suing another company. This sort of word salad whataboutism changes are meant to confuse you on purpose. It's meant to be nebulous. Kind of dodgy as well in order for Nintendo to have more leeway and ability to change how things are done or said in terms of the legal process. This way, if Nintendo's lawyers come up with a gotcha of some kind, Nintendo can go, see, actually we did say that in the patent. Because the more nebulous they are, the more technically they're right as well. So what's the end goal here, you may be asking? In Legal Mindset's opinion, Nintendo wants to win this lawsuit for two reasons. The first is cement themselves as the de facto giants of monster capturing mechanics and games in the entire world. The other, and this is why this is so important that Pocket Pair wins, is that if Nintendo wins their lawsuit specifically in their details, that they want and demand the removal of Palworld from all digital storefronts and to be paid for the damages caused by Pocket Pair's game to their brand and image of Pokemon and Nintendo as a company. Yeah, it's pretty crazy that this isn't just a money thing. Nintendo genuinely wants to erase Palworld from existence, okay? The hate is real, guys. However, according to Pocket Pair and Legal Mindset, Palworld is not infringing on any of Nintendo's patents because they cannot claim to own a game mechanic. One of these is obviously, as the patent image shows here, the concept of capturing a monster with a ball. Yeah, we all know the ties to Pokemon, but it's not just really Pokemon. Many games use some sort of capture mechanic to also capture creatures. Monster Hunter Stories, technically just Monster Hunter in general, allows you to capture monsters, although with nets and stuff. And then you also have games like Yokai Watch? I think it's Yokai Watch. Anyway, Yokai Watch also does this as well. Hell, even Dragon Quest allows you to capture monsters too. Not to mention Shin Megami Tensei, which, in case you don't know, was a big inspiration and was actually a series about capturing monsters before even Pokemon. Just Google it, as it's seen here, which reads, yes, the Shin Megami Tensei series, which includes Persona, is considered a significant inspiration for the Pokemon franchise. SMT, with its monster collecting and fusing gameplay, predates Pokemon by several years. If you want exact numbers, Shin Megami Tensei first had a game in 1987, and the first Pokemon game was released in 1996. So almost 10 years after, yet you don't see Shin Megami Tensei or Atlas suing Pokemon for using monster capturing mechanics or more. The reason behind this is very simple, because they don't own the patents, and you cannot own the patents to gameplay mechanics like this because they're used everywhere. It would be like trying to trademark the concept of jumping or shooting in a video game. Yep, it doesn't work that way. So, for Nintendo to do this to Palworld is hypocritical and proves just how bloodthirsty Nintendo really is when it comes to how they operate as a company, especially in the eyes of what they perceive to be their competition. They'd rather not coexist with anything that could challenge them, but just erase them completely, and that's just not right. So the fact that Nintendo is currently losing this lawsuit is hopefully exactly what happens. Because nothing would make me happier than to see a tyrant as big as Nintendo with their corporate iron fist being crushed by the little guys and being exposed as the bullies that they are. In that same Gamers Fray article, which I referenced earlier, they say later on in their detailed breakdown as seen here, that Nintendo is launching multiple versions of patents at Palworld specifically, hoping that any one of these will stick. Apparently, this is done because launching just a single version can be thrown out of court and then you got nothing. But if you got multiple slightly altered versions of a similar patent in your possession, you can then in theory bombard your enemy with a deluge of nonsense, and eventually, hopefully, one will stick and then you'll win your lawsuit. Is this scummy and annoying? Absolutely. Has it worked in the past? Absolutely. Nintendo is of course known for crushing their enemies by overwhelming them with legal nonsense and using their billions to simply outlast their opponents until they cannot financially continue their defense against Nintendo's claims and will just have to submit instead. Yes, this is a real tactic that is allowed. Think of it like a castle being sieged. If the enemy, in this case Nintendo, surrounds the castle, and in doing so, that castle being sieged cannot get supplies from the outside, it's really only a matter of time before the people inside the castle either starve to death, turn on one another in desperation, or plead for defeat to escape their situation. And Nintendo is that fat king sitting outside in the camp laughing while eating grapes while watching their enemies drop in weight and sanity pretty much every single time they sue someone. But as Legal Minds had discovered, based on Nintendo's patents and what they're pushing, they don't have a strong case to create a lawsuit against Palworld specifically everywhere that is not Japan. So in America, for example, Nintendo's lawsuits do not hold as much water. And this is where it could possibly end Nintendo's lawsuit and have them lose to Palworld, which would be a big win for everyone who isn't Nintendo. Because these lawsuits are not just relegated to one country because of the nature of video games and how they're sold, which is obviously global, but all of them. So, sure, Nintendo could in theory, I guess, win their lawsuit to Pocket Pair within Japan. However, the majority of Palworld's player base, if you don't know, is not within Japan, but mostly in America and beyond. For example, in many articles since Palworld's release, their devs have said the sole reason why they added guns to the game in the first place was to appease to North American audiences, claiming that American players love to shoot things, and I mean they sold millions of copies in America alone, so yeah, they're kind of right. So let's say that Nintendo wins a lawsuit, partially in Japan, but they lose everywhere else. Then it's a massive win still for Palworld, because their actual player base is not really Japan anyway. So if Nintendo's patents work for Palworld in Japan, it could also lead to different versions of the game existing. Where in Japan, if you play Palworld, it has no balls to throw or pals to ride, I guess, but then outside of Japan, the game's philosophy and design would remain unchanged. That would piss off Nintendo a lot, and honestly, I hope that it does. And as a Screen Rant article, which is this one here, don't worry about the boycott stuff that they're saying. That's not really a thing, because it's just mostly some users online saying that they want to boycott Nintendo for how they're treating, Pocket Pair. But what's really important here is what Screen Rant says in this section here, that the ability to change a patent or its wording during an ongoing lawsuit is actually, if you don't know, perfectly legal in both America and Japan, which is kind of crazy if you ask me, especially because this would lead to many times where things are just changed to make you win due to market manipulation, and I'm surprised that's even allowed. As one user said in the article, how is Nintendo allowed to hold onto patents for things for so long even when they're not using them? The answer, as it said later in this article, is obvious. It's because they're greedy. That's all it ever was and ever will be. Nintendo has gone after so many others in the past for lesser reasons too. They simply do not want any competition when it comes to what they make at all. Because if Palworld were to evolve itself into a more Pokemon-like experience with more of the hallmarks that series is known for, that would not only pressure Nintendo to just make better games, but also delegitimize a reason to own their hardware if the same sort of experiences can be played outside of their ecosystem. Because as seen here from IGN, the Switch 2 was the fastest selling console in history there, and yeah, for good reason. Because Nintendo smartfully keeps an iron grip on their IPs and where they can be played, which is obviously only on their hardware unless you're a pirate, of course. And the idea is that Nintendo wants to make their platform so strong and synonymous with their franchises that they own that you have no choice legally anyway but to buy a Switch 2 to play their games. But when a smaller developer makes a far more innovative version of your best-selling franchise for half the price and sells over 10 million units in a single year, yeah, they're gonna want to bury it at the bottom of the sea forever. It's really just jealousy and greed on Nintendo's part. But it is good to know that they're currently anyways not winning their lawsuit, especially out here in the US. Because if they were to lose, Palworld would genuinely become unstoppable. Since Nintendo doesn't really cater to PlayStation, Xbox, or Steam players, this then leaves hundreds of millions of potential customers that are eager and ready to buy and play something like Pokemon that isn't Pokemon, since Nintendo will never release their games on any other platform. But if Palworld is able to grow without any real resistance on the backs of every major platform in opposition of Nintendo, yeah, that's a big problem for them. But I honestly hope that's exactly what happens, because Nintendo is greedy as hell. As Gamers Frey says here in their article, Nintendo has put themselves in a bad spot with this Palworld lawsuit. Because now if they rewrite every patent and resubmit, technically it would only be a single patent being viable for the lawsuit instead of the many before, which would severely lessen their chances of winning what is already a case crumbling apart in their hands as time goes on, because it's frankly ridiculous. Gamers Frey does state that Nintendo back in February 2025 did update another patent as well, which wasn't really discovered because it wasn't finalized until very recently. Its patent number is 12220638, which is this one on screen here that you're all seeing. It's an updated patent about Nintendo's right to owning the concept of capturing monsters within video games. And as you're seeing, they're using a lot of terminology and just paragraph after paragraph of information to detail exactly what they want to own and control when it comes to these patents. As you can see, I'm just scrolling, and look at how long this patent is just to explain that they own the concept of capturing things with a ball. Why is the patent so long? It's because of what I detailed before. They add a bunch of useless jargon to tire their opposition out and make the patent as nebulous as possible while still having just enough to make the patent legal for submission. It's all being done so Nintendo can destroy their opposition through smoke and mirrors. Don't you love it when greedy companies want to get even greedier? Again, to refresh your memory in case you haven't seen my other Palworld Nintendo videos, another big reason why these patents are finalized and pushed is because in Japan anyways, they use these patents to not only control the concepts but license out the ideas to other companies to make money by allowing them to use these ideas in their games as well. This is likely why games like Monster Hunter Stories or more haven't been sued by Nintendo, because they probably paid for the rights to use the things. Sure, Palworld could in theory try to pay Nintendo for the right to use the capture mechanics or more in the future, but it's very obvious now that Nintendo doesn't really want to even entertain this idea, because they frankly just want Palworld to die and just be erased for even attempting to challenge their dominance for the #1 spot when it comes to monster capturing games. As Screen Rant said recently in an article, they're chosen a clear side as to who they think is the winner, and yes, they did choose Pocket Pair and Palworld, which honestly, that's who I'm thinking will win this as well. As Screen Rant says here, when Nintendo was done with these patent changes and adding gobbledygook wording like even when, they are clearly desperate and are looking for the much needed win that they desire in this lawsuit that, a reminder, they started in the first place. And as Green Rant says here, based on how the legal battle is going, this could be the beginning of the end of this lawsuit, with Nintendo losing big time. What could happen if Nintendo loses, you may be asking? It's kind of unclear. Obviously, there would be a massive payout in Pocket Pair's favor. I doubt Pocket Pair could, reverse Uno this and somehow get something as big as Pokemon deleted or delisted or anything. But what it can and could do is ruin Nintendo's reputation and that of the Pokemon brand, and force them to stop making slop that is barely good enough for sale while raking in millions for the absolute bare minimum design-wise for every new entry in their flagship series, and hopefully also stop them from just suing anybody that they want for similar reasons. Because it's honestly frustrating how lazy Nintendo and Game Freak are with Pokemon all of these years, especially when they have revolutionized and revitalized other franchises like Zelda over the years, or more recently with Donkey Kong Bonanza. Yeah, Pokemon remains in this pathetic, good enough state to just barely meet the requirements for a new entry just to make millions every time a new game releases. What I truly hope is that if and when Nintendo loses this lawsuit, it stops them from being the bullies that they are to others so frequently. They're seriously one of the most bloodthirsty companies out there when it comes to crushing freedom of development or expression in other games. And it's really weird how a company that has things like monkeys wearing ties or elves fighting monsters, that their image is so kid-friendly, and yet they're so hell-bent when it comes to the corporatized side of the equation. And it still makes me roll my eyes that Nintendo is the company still releasing games from companies with subpar performance compared to their competition. Like, for example, look at Borderlands 4, which is coming to Switch 2, although a few weeks after its release. It's coming out in October for Switch 2. But the caveat here is that it will release at 30 frames per second. Oh joy, another game that will play worse on Nintendo's hardware again, and it's new hardware, by the way. But this is what's going on with Nintendo right now. If they're not trying to make everyone pay $80 American digitally for a game, or $120 in Canada like me, they're throwing their entire bank accounts behind them to crush the little guys because they're being shown how lazy they are when it comes to how poorly optimized the Pokemon franchise has become. May Nintendo lose the lawsuit, lose millions of dollars, and get the just desserts they so dearly need for ever trying this in the future. And I hope that more Pokemon-like games exist in the future as well, if not for any other reason than to annoy Nintendo and make them lose even more money in lawsuits. But what do you think about all of this? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to keep up to date, and I'll see you next time.